Welcome to Poker Fraud Alert Radio. I am Todd Dandruff Wittelis, your host. This is being brought to you live and recorded live on March 20th, 2026. The time right now, 12:03 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. I really hate when I waste my time. I really hate when I record something pointlessly, but I did just that 2 days ago because I did a show about the raid on the Lodge Card Club in Round Rock, Texas. I did a show about 2 hours long, and I was all ready to edit and post it, and then something happened. I received a copy of the search warrant, which explained a whole lot of stuff I didn't know when I recorded and broadcasted the previous show. So I said, you know what, there's no point to edit and post it because it's old information. I know so much more now than when I did that show. So rather than post something that is now obsolete, I've decided I'm going to redo the whole thing. So you're never going to see that show. If you heard it live, then good for you. But this is an updated version because I'm one of the few people who has a copy of that warrant, and now I can explain much more as to what happened and what the likely future is and why this occurred and how it went down. I can tell you all of that, whereas 2 days ago I had to take a lot of guesses. I will still be taking some guesses here. I don't know everything, but I know a hell of a lot more than I did when I did the previous episode, which you will never find. So, I'm going to first give you an overview of what the Lodge is and was, and I'm going to give you a quick overview of Texas law regarding the legality of poker. And then I will tell you what happened on the day of the raid. Then I will tell you some reactions that the Lodge itself had on social media and Doug Polk, and a few people responding with Doug Polk I will highlight, such as Tom Dwan. And then we will get into the warrant that explains everything from the law enforcement perspective. And by the time you're done with this, I think you will have a pretty good idea of the entire story, except for the gaps I have to just guess at because I don't have all the details, but I have a hell of a lot more than I used to. So we're going to start off describing what the Lodge is. And if you know all this stuff already, you can fast forward if you're listening in the archives. This show will be posted in podcast format on every podcast app you can think of. Just look them up. Poker Fraud Alert Radio. Look that up on any podcasting app you have, or YouTube, and you will find it there. So the Lodge Card Club is was a Texas poker room, which has existed for some time, but it became much more prominent when Doug Polk got involved. It is in Round Rock, Texas, which is near Austin. They call themselves the Lodge Card Club Austin because they also have a branch in San Antonio. But it's not actually in Austin, it's in Round Rock, which is a suburb of Austin. And I don't know when it started, it's not really important, but Doug Polk got involved in early 2022, actually at the very, very beginning of 2022 in January. And it was reported at the time that Doug Polk, Andrew Nemi, and Brad Owen, quote, purchased the Lodge Card Club in Austin. Then it was said, well, they didn't buy the entire thing, but they purchased a large share of the Lodge Card Club in Austin. The exact ownership structure was never disclosed, and it was never disclosed who else owned the Lodge. And it was assumed by me and many others that whoever originally owned it probably retained some ownership as well because it seemed to be a partial purchase. So that was all most of us knew about it. But the Lodge really grew over the next 4 years, mainly because Doug Polk was heavily promoting it. And of course, Doug Polk is a huge figure in poker, especially on social media. He has a very big audience, and he was able to really make the Lodge a lot bigger. The Lodge also expanded in May of 2024. That's when they opened their second room in San Antonio by acquiring what was known as the Rounders Card Club there. But the San Antonio version of it operated and still operates independently. And by the way, that was not rated and that is still open. They also expanded in 2024 by opening up a separate restaurant and bar that was attached to the Lodge Card Club. So it was physically attached, but it operated independently. However, you could order food and drink from that restaurant and it would be brought over to the Lodge card room. So that's what the Lodge is, and it had some high-stakes games that were streamed. You may have seen them. It had tournaments. It had a WPT event coming to it that is now not going to happen because of the raid. But it was definitely growing in both size and influence in the poker space. And I'm sure it was doing quite well financially as well. There really had not been any scandals regarding the Lodge, so it also had a pretty good reputation. The Lodge actually was the largest card room in Texas at the time of the raid. The other big card room in Texas, there's several branches of it, is called Texas Card House, aka TCH. So you may have heard of TCH, and that is the Lodge's main competition. And there's a number of smaller card rooms and medium-sized card rooms that are dotting the Texas landscape. Of course, Texas is a very large state, both population-wise and geographically. Now, it's very important to understand the legality of live poker in Texas, or shall I say, the lack thereof. Because unlike places such as California and many other states, it is actually not technically legal to run a card room. It's not technically legal to have a business that offers poker for real money. So how are they doing it? Why didn't they get busted a long time ago? Why aren't all these other card rooms getting busted? Well, some of them actually have been by local authorities. But the truth is, Texas law on card clubs, poker rooms, is very ambiguous. It's a gray area. And that is because they have a carve-out in the law regarding when it is okay to have poker games. And they have this carve-out in order to not make it illegal when people want to play home games. So if you want to invite 5 of your friends over to play a home game for real money, it's actually legal in Texas to do that. Same thing with if you're in an office and you have your coworkers all get together after work on Friday night and play poker in the office. Again, that's not illegal even if it's for real money. There are certain restrictions. For example, it has to be a private setting and you can't take rake. And there's other restrictions to it. But basically the carve-out exists so people don't have to worry about any kind of possible arrest for just running a home poker game. But just like any other carve-out or exception to the law, people try to take advantage of it. Now, in this case, I think the taking advantage of is good because it allows for card rooms to exist in Texas, so people there who want to play live poker have an option. Otherwise, they would have no options. So I don't agree with the fact that they don't just have licensed and regulated poker in Texas, as many other states do. That's really what they need there. There shouldn't have to be this whole situation where it exists through a loophole. And a big problem here is that because it's not explicitly legal and because it's not explicitly illegal, there ends up with a lot of a gray area where these rooms never know when they're going to get busted. They never know when the hammer of the law is going to clamp down on them. The way these rooms operate and the way they believe they're doing so legally is by running a private membership club where poker just happens to take place. Because remember, it is legal to play poker for real money if there's no rake in the game. And it is legal to do this in a business setting. So what if you have a business that's technically not a poker room? It's just a private club. And at the club, something people do is play poker for real money. So that was the loophole, and that's how all these rooms got going. But of course, there's problems here, and there's always the potential to get in trouble. The exact law that has to do with this, there's actually two of them. It's Texas Penal Code 47.02 and 47.04. First, it defines that a person is committing an offense if they basically place a bet on anything. Sports, politics, card games, dice games, any kind of gambling device. So any kind of gambling in Texas, according to 47.02, is an offense. However, it says it is a defense to prosecution under this section if, 1, the actor, meaning the player, engaged in gambling in a private place, 2, no person received any economic benefit other than personal winnings, and 3, except for the advantage of skill or luck, the risks of losing and the chances of winning were the same for all participants. All three of these have to be true. Now, it's not saying that if these three are true, then it's legal. It's saying that this is a defense to prosecution, which is a weird way of putting it. It's basically saying you can still be prosecuted, but this is a valid defense, and then you'll be judged innocent. It's a really strange way. It's almost like guilty until proven innocent. So those three items of criteria are what these rooms are counting on. So these rooms are saying, okay, well, if we make it into a private place, meaning a private club, and if we don't charge any rake, then we're not violating number 2 about no person can receive any economic benefit other than the personal winnings in the game. And then the part about the nobody having the advantage, well, that describes poker, because unless there's cheating going on, then everybody does have the same chance to win aside from skill and luck. So that is why many people came to believe that they could do this private club model and stay within the bounds of the law in Texas. There was a legal opinion that was given in 2005 by then Attorney General Greg Abbott. This opinion was used as the basis of the raid. I have a copy of it. I have the last page, actually, page 7 of 7, which is a summary. And even though this is from 21 years ago, it is important because this was really used to justify the raid they did in the lodge. It says, summary. A holder of an on-premises alcoholic beverage permit may not, without violating both Section 47.04a of the Penal Code and Rule 35.31 of the Alcoholic Beverage Commission, host a poker tournament in which participants risk money or any other thing of value for the opportunity to win a prize. A holder of an on-premises alcoholic beverage permit may, without violating either section, host a poker tournament in which participants do not risk money or any other thing of value for the opportunity to win a prize. And it's signed Greg Abbott. This is on June 20th, 2005, and the opinion number is labeled GA-0335. This 21-year-old opinion was used to justify this raid because basically they're saying that they did host a poker tournament for real money while they were serving alcohol, and that is true. Now you might wonder, how come the other places weren't raided? Well, that's a good question, because plenty of places do this, serve alcohol and host a poker tournament. So we don't know the answer to that, but we will explore this as we continue with the show. The way this relates to Texas Penal Code 47.04 is that a real money poker game is not allowed to take place in something considered a public place. And this legal opinion, while the portion of the public place was not stated in that summary I read you, the first 6 pages made reference to the fact that anywhere that alcohol is served is automatically deemed a public place. Now, by a public place, I don't mean a publicly owned place. I don't mean like a park or a library. I mean a public place which is just something open to the general public, where anyone can walk in without any kind of gatekeeping or prior permission. So an example of a public place that is not publicly owned would be a grocery store. And a private place is anything where there is some kind of restriction as far as entering, where you're kept out if you don't meet a certain set of criteria. Greg Abbott gave the opinion that if alcohol is served, it's automatically a public place. And when I say served, I mean not that if people bring their own alcohol, but if the place provides alcohol, that at that point they can't claim to be a private place, which is a little bit weird, but that was the opinion given in 2005. So the reason I mention this is that these card rooms, some of them have been afraid to apply for a liquor license, even though this can be very lucrative for people to order and pay for drinks as they're playing poker. A lot of these places have not applied for these liquor licenses because they are afraid it's going to induce them to become a public place as far as the law sees them, and that then they could get in trouble. The Lodge went forward with this, and not only did they have a liquor license in 2022 that allowed them to have wine and malt beverages, but in 2024, when they did that expansion and they added the restaurant and bar, they got a more advanced liquor license that was called a mixed beverage license. So here they're holding the mixed beverage license. Here they are serving alcohol at the tables, and they're offering real money gambling. So that was already taking an additional risk. Furthermore, in order to maintain that it's a private place, these card rooms really would have been smart, and some do it this way, to make sure it really is completely private, meaning that nobody can stroll in without a membership. So if you don't buy a membership, they're not letting you in the door, and they block the door with a security guard who says, show your membership or buy one right now or get lost. And if you can walk in, or at least walk in past the very front desk and roam around the business without a membership, then that can also be a problem. So these are all things that can be potential pitfalls for the business. It's not as simple as just starting a membership club and then putting poker tables there and then making sure you don't charge a rake. One way that they also get around the rake but then still get paid for people playing poker is they charge a seat rental fee, which to me, I don't know, that's already starting to also stretch it, that people are actually paying to rent the seat rather than pay a rake for every hand. So that's been a little bit controversial as well as to whether a seat rental fee means rake. I don't think that really played into what happened here, but that's just something I wanted to mention as well. So the bottom line is, if you think that Texas poker is legal just because all these card rooms exist, you are very wrong. If you think it's super illegal and all of these are going to get raided and shut down and maybe the owner's charged one day, well, you also might be wrong, because this has been an ongoing situation for a long time. There have been some raids. There have been some attempts to close other rooms. And as I said, it's usually at the local level. And typically the rooms have prevailed when the whole thing was over. So I guess that's the good news. But the bad news is this is still not a settled matter. And much more recently, Attorney General Ken Paxton in Texas was asked to take a stance on this, to finally say, look, is Texas poker illegal or legal? Just come forward with it. Is it okay to have these card rooms, or is it just not okay at all? And he said, I'm not going to touch it. I'm not going to give an opinion. So he just didn't want to go either way. So that's pretty much maintaining the status quo, that nobody wants to settle this matter, and then we end up with situations like this. So that's a quick lesson on Texas poker that'll definitely very much play into the discussion we're going to have as far as what happened to the Lodge. So what actually happened was on March 10th, 2026, the Lodge was raided. They did not have any kind of warning that this was going to occur. It's not like they knew that the government was on their ass and any day this could occur. That's not the case at all. They thought everything was fine. They had a WPT event scheduled very shortly. After that, it was business as usual there. They had no idea this was coming. They had no idea that they were under investigation for what turned out to be about 2 years, because everything was done quietly in the background. The raid was conducted by the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission, also known as the TABC. They also had with them state police. They also had with them the Internal Revenue Service. But this was an action by the TABC, not the IRS. I'm not sure why the IRS was there, but they were secondary to whatever this was. And this was a TABC action. They were the ones who were investigating it. They were the ones who conducted the raid. So that's who we're going to talk about here. The TABC is a state agency. So this was not a local raid. This is not the local police in Round Rock or the county sheriff. It was state police, the TABC. What happened was they came in. They shut down the room. They had a warrant to examine everything and take whatever they wanted, basically. They froze their bank accounts. And the players were not arrested, but they were told that they have to provide their ID before they leave. So each player, before they left, had to show ID. And the players were told, you're not in any trouble, and you can come back and cash your chips in when the business reopens. So take your chips home with you. So at least the players knew that they weren't in any kind of legal jeopardy, and at least their chips weren't confiscated. So at least they will theoretically be able to cash their chips when the lodge either reopens or just reopens for the purpose of paying people. But they were just told, take your chips and go home, and by the way, we're not letting you out till we find out who you are. Nobody was arrested. The employees were not arrested. The management was not arrested. The owners were not arrested. Of course, Doug Polk was not arrested. So there have been no arrests regarding this matter, to my knowledge. I know on the day of the raid there were no arrests, and I don't believe in the 10 days since that anyone has been arrested. So at least that's good. But the room was shut down. Then there was a void of information. Everybody claimed not to know anything, which was a little bit strange, I will tell you. This includes Doug Polk and the lodge. So I'll tell you some things that were put out on social media in the days following the raid. On March 11th, in the morning, this is a day later, so the raid occurred in the early afternoon, I believe, of March 10th. So about a day later, in the morning, Doug Polk wrote, I am waiting on some additional information, but I will make an in-depth statement within the next day about what's going on with the lodge. Now, spoiler alert, he did not make a statement within the next day. He took several days. Tom Dwan, who does not like Doug Polk, and Doug Polk actually has a number of haters and enemies who just don't care for him. Some of them are people that Doug has covered negatively on his channel before. Some have been people that he's made fun of. Some have been people that just don't like Doug's channel or his attitude. And some of them are just people who are either jealous of his success or just enjoy hating on prominent people. I don't think Doug is a bad guy. I don't really know him. I know of him. He knows of me, but we've never met. I've never had any private conversations with him. I am very neutral on Doug Polk. I'm really very neutral on the lodge and everybody who is involved with the lodge. So I am a good one to cover this because I really don't have any bias in this situation. And I also am not one of these people who just likes to automatically side against the government when these things happen. I always want to look at everything and see if what is being done is reasonable. So I'm not someone who just takes the side against the government because it's an easy thing to do on social media to get popular. That's never been me. For those of you that know me, you are probably aware of that. I always like to look at everything from all angles and try to come up with a fair assessment of the situation. And that's what I'm going to do here on this show, just letting you know. But anyway, Tom Dwan attacked Doug in response to that statement that he's waiting for additional information and he'll post within the next day. Tom wrote, "You made a lot of your brand out of going after people in times like this. I hope you can take a minute to reflect and realize the negatives of some of those choices. Hope you do stuff like that less in the future. So basically, Tom Dwan is saying, hey, your channel is all about delving into other people's business and criticizing them when you feel that they're engaged in wrongdoing or making light of tough situations they're in. And hey, you're in a tough situation now, so maybe next time you can think of that before you criticize people. That's what Tom was basically saying. I don't agree. There's a lot of shady and bad things that go on in the poker world. There's a lot of bad actors, both businesses and people. And when they're called out, when what they're doing is exposed, as Doug has done many times to people, that's a good thing. That's not hating. That's not being overly negative. That's coming forward with stories that need to be told. And I do that here on this show too. And of course, I've been accused of the same thing. I have a lot of people who don't like me for doing the same thing. So I can totally understand how Doug feels about this when people come at him for criticizing others or for putting out negativity about certain things in the poker world. But nevertheless, the more prominent you are, the more haters you will get. Doug is a lot more prominent than I am by a wide margin. He has a much bigger audience than I do. So he does get a lot of haters, and when you put out the type of content he does, that's going to happen. So Tom Dwan is someone he's talked about before, and Tom must not like him, and Tom took this moment to kind of give him a kick on social media. Well, Doug, who obviously was in a bad mood after what occurred the day before, tweeted back, "I have personally guaranteed that all player funds will be safe as this witch hunt from TABC plays out. You still allegedly owe tens of millions of dollars. Shut the fuck up." So, of course, there are rumors about Tom Dwan that he owes a whole lot of money. And some people have come forward and said that he owes them money, like Haralabal Vulgaris. So Tom Dwan is known as someone who doesn't pay all his debts, and his reputation has suffered for that. So basically, Doug is calling him a hypocrite, saying, hey, don't tell me that I don't act right and that I should consider changing when you're someone who owes tens of millions of dollars to people, so shut up. What was interesting about that statement, though, beyond what he said back to Tom, was that he personally guaranteed that all player funds will be safe as this, quote, witch hunt plays out, which means that Doug was guaranteeing right there publicly on X that he was going to cover everybody's outstanding chips and outstanding tournament payouts if somehow they can't get it from the lodge, which I think was good. I think that's commendable that he's trying to make the public feel better about this. It's funny, he said, I have personally guaranteed. No one saw him personally guaranteeing it anywhere until he wrote that. So I think maybe what he was trying to say is I am personally guaranteeing. But it was like he was acting as if everybody should know he was personally guaranteeing it, where no one had seen this before. But great, I'm glad that he's doing it. Then on March 12th or maybe late March 11th, they emailed out to the members, the ones who had signed up for a membership at the lodge and provided their email address. Those people got this message. To our valued members, as you may be seeing this from news reports, state police and the Texas Alcohol and Beverage Commission executed a search warrant of the lodge this past Tuesday morning. Our attorneys are working to understand the reasons behind the search, but at this time, the situation has not been explained to us. Our legal counsel has contacted the relevant authorities and hope to learn more, but in our view, we are operating with integrity, using all best practices, and for many years have been doing business in absolute accordance with Texas law. This is obviously upsetting, and unfortunately, until the situation is fully understood, the lodge is closed. As we cooperate with authorities to resolve the situation, please know that we are doing everything possible to restore normal operations, to include ensuring member assets are secure. The lodge is a community, and we greatly appreciate each of you and the support each of you have extended our way. Thank you for your patience and understanding. We hope to have this matter resolved quickly. The lodge management team. Well, I don't think that was the best statement. I don't think that it's going to be resolved quickly. They said we hope to, but it's not likely to be resolved quickly, in my opinion. And 10 days later, it doesn't look like it's really getting there. They said that they're not understanding. Basically, our attorneys are working to understand the reasons behind the search, and it hasn't been explained to us. this statement implies like we don't know what happened. We were following the law. They raided us anyway. They wouldn't tell us anything. That's basically what they're saying here. And I don't know if I believe that authorities showed up with a warrant and they didn't look at the warrant or they weren't given the warrant. I just don't believe that they knew nothing. Maybe they didn't know anything, but it's hard for me to believe that. I think they just didn't want to say. So that was a little bit of a weird thing to put out. They could say we're still processing this. We're still trying to get all the information and we want to process everything before we make a full statement. But to say, hey, we can't get the information is a little bit odd. On March 12th, Poker News contacted the TABC themselves, and I'm going to give Poker News some props here. They did a very good job reporting on this matter. Seemed like all the information was coming from them and not the Lodge or anyone involved with the Lodge. But on March 12th, Poker News contacted the TABC, and they were able to find out that it was about suspected illegal gambling and money laundering. Oh. Now that is a little bit scary, right? That makes it a lot more serious. Suspected illegal gambling and money laundering. Well, right away, I was a little skeptical of this. Not that Poker News was putting out wrong information. I know they were putting out what they were told. But money laundering can be applied very broadly. It's not always what it sounds like. So I wasn't sure what that really meant. And I really wanted more details before casting judgment. Of course, the haters who wanted to see Doug Polk fail or get in trouble or get arrested, they were loving that piece of information. But I was like, I don't really know if I believe that this was money laundering, and that's what this was really about. I still wasn't sure what the truth was here. So that was on March 12th. Then it was kind of quiet for a while. For a few days it was quiet, which was weird. Like what happened to the statement from Doug Polk that was coming within a day? He didn't make the statement. Well, the Lodge finally made a statement at 10:14 a.m. Pacific time. This is what they said. We know our loyal staff members and followers have been anxiously waiting for an update regarding the recent events that led to the closure of the club. We recognize that the closure has had a serious impact for many. More than 200 staff members rely on the Lodge for their livelihoods, and many of our members have funds tied up in chips or pending tournament payouts. We understand the concern and frustration, and we want everyone to know that it is not being taken lightly. As much as we would like to provide a detailed update, we are unable to do so at this time because despite our legal team's best efforts to obtain additional information from the authorities, very little information has been made available. Which, again, I don't think I believe it. It just sounds weird to me that they know nothing and that somehow Poker News can find out. How come their attorneys are coming to blank and Poker News is finding stuff out? It just wasn't sitting right with me. What we do know is that no charges have been filed, and we remain committed to cooperating fully so that any concerns can be addressed. At the same time, we can confirm that all the club's assets and bank accounts have been frozen. In addition, we've been told not to reopen until the investigation concludes. By the way, that part I believe to be true. The Lodge has always taken its obligation to operate lawfully very seriously. The leadership team is committed to ensuring that the Lodge operates transparently, responsibly, and in good faith within Texas law by emphasizing strengthened oversight and continued improvement of operations. Unfortunately, we do not know how long this process will take or when we will be allowed to operate again. We obviously believe that the longer our doors remain closed, the greater the impact becomes, not just on the business itself, but the hundreds of staff members, vendors, partners, and community members who rely on the Lodge every day. Your continued support of the Lodge, its traditions, its staff, and the community that exists inside these walls means the world to us. We are upset and frustrated by the disruption this has caused and remain hopeful that we will be able to work constructively with the authorities in a very timely manner so that we can move forward and reopen our doors. All we can do at this moment is promise to share more information as we are able. In the meantime, if the Lodge has meant something to you as a place to play, work, or build friendships, we encourage you to share your support in the comments. Hearing this from the community means more to our staff and leadership than we can put into words. Well, they had a lot of negative responses to that. Some of it was positive. A lot of it was saying, good luck, we support you, screw the government, et cetera, et cetera. But there were some people that were saying, look, this looks like an AI statement, especially because the statement had a number of what are called M dashes, which is two dashes together in the middle of the sentence. And it did have a number of M dashes, especially near the end. Some people these days say that if they see M dashes in a statement, it's AI written, which you can't just say because I know humans who use M dashes. In fact, I see that human in the mirror every day. I use them. I've used them for many, many years before AI wrote anything. So you can't just say a statement with M dashes is AI written, but it did kind of come off like it was an AI statement in some ways. Even I noticed that as I was reading it. I decided to ask one of the experts on AI statements, an AI. I asked Grok if this statement was written by AI, and it did say that it shows several hallmarks commonly associated with AI-generated text, such as overly polished formality, repetitive empathetic phrasing, and frequent use of M dashes for parenthetical clauses, a stylistic tick often seen in outputs from models like ChatGPT. So it says it's not definitive proof, but it said it's leaning towards it being AI drafted or assisted. So I think I believe that too. Which is stupid, because if it really is AI generated, even partially AI generated, you can't do that because people recognize it. And it's not like they have a bunch of morons on their staff or ownership. Brad Owen's a very good writer. Doug Polk is a good writer. So why don't they have them write a statement? They don't need AI to write a statement. So I hope this wasn't AI. I hope it just looked like AI, but kind of think it was AI. Not a huge deal, it just wasn't the best look. Same day, March 15th, they got some attention from a non-poker community member, Tim Poole, who's a conservative influencer who started to take an interest in poker recently. He tweeted, "Freezing assets and shutting a business down without conviction is vile. This reeks of process punishment." And then he quote tweeted the Lodge's statement. Well, the following day, and this was 5 days after Doug said he'd make a statement within 1 day, Doug made a statement. This is at 2:20 p.m. Central on March 16th. He wrote, "I did not participate in and still have no knowledge of any money laundering in the operation of the Lodge. I understand that some people assume that because there was a search warrant, a crime must have been committed, but that's not really how the process works. A search warrant is just one step in an investigation based on an affidavit from law enforcement. That affidavit has not been given to the Lodge or made public." Now let's stop for a second here. He doesn't say he doesn't have the search warrant. He says he doesn't have the affidavit from law enforcement, which is interesting. "My heart goes out to the hundreds of Lodge employees whose jobs are in jeopardy. These are good, kind, hardworking people, and it is painful to see them struggle through this uncertainty. I also care deeply about the situation for our members. There are numerous people with both chip balances and tournament payouts that cannot currently be processed. I want to reiterate that these members will be made whole, and I will personally make sure that happens in coordination with my attorneys so that is done properly. With the advice of my lawyers, I am committed to cooperating with law enforcement officials, answering any questions they have, and doing everything I can to clear up the confusion of what has and has not been happening at the Lodge. I expect to provide another update soon, once more information is available and my attorneys have had an opportunity to fully assess the situation. In the meantime, I appreciate your patience and support." So that was Doug's eventual statement on the matter. Well, again, it doesn't say a whole lot. So people are like, okay, well, I guess good that you're paying people, which I agree. Like, that's very big of him to put everyone's mind at ease that their balances are going to be covered, that no one's going to get stiffed out of this. That's a very important part of this. So props to Doug for taking care of that in people's minds. And I know he hasn't paid anyone yet, but I would find it highly unlikely that he would commit to this and then not do it. So good for him on that. However, people still had a lot of questions. And really nothing further has been put out from the Lodge or Doug Polk or anyone else involved that has clarified this further. Now, Poker News put out something that clarified this further, but the Lodge did not. So then on March 17th, Poker News obtained the search warrant. And they put out an article that was describing various portions of the search warrant. So they didn't go through every page of the search warrant and pretty much summarize the whole thing, but they did go through it and summarize what they felt were the most important parts. They also did a pretty good podcast that night explaining everything. So they've been leading this the whole way as far as giving people information. They've done a very good job. Without them, people would really be in the dark. Chad Holloway, who is with Poker News, he read the entire search warrant, and he wrote on March 17th, I have read the search and seizure warrant against the lodge in full. It does appear to be a witch hunt. Essentially, they're deeming poker in Texas illegal and therefore classifying what we consider normal banking transactions as money laundering because its proceeds were from what they say is illegal gambling. All the undercover operations outlined in the affidavit describe a normally functioning, well-run poker room. To me, nothing in it suggests what we in the poker world would consider scandalous or nefarious, but rather authorities simply taking a stance on a gray area loophole they consider illegal. If the TABC ultimately prevails that poker at the lodge constitutes illegal gambling, it'll shut down every room in Texas. Well, I partially agree with this. I don't agree with the end. I don't believe that Texas poker is in existential jeopardy. But I do agree with his general assessment of the lodge that they weren't doing anything blatantly illegal or unethical. I don't think it was run all that well, and it put them into some legal jeopardy, which we'll get to. But they were not doing anything that was harmful to any players, nor were they taking part in anything like money laundering, in my opinion. And we will get to that because, as I said at the beginning of the show, I got a copy of that search warrant. Now, you might wonder, how did I get it? Because it's not publicly posted anywhere. Well, I can't tell you, but I got it. Sometimes I get things that I can't reveal where it came from. I will say I didn't do anything illegal to get this, but I will also say it's not particularly easy to get. I don't know how Poker News got it, but I'm just telling you that this is not an easy thing to get, which is why you haven't seen it posted anywhere. Now, at first my attitude was, if I get a hold of it at any time, I will just fire it out there, because Poker News didn't put it out there. They described things in it, but they didn't put it out there. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to fire it out there if I get it. Well, then I got it and I read it. I'm like, okay, you know what? I kind of see why Poker News didn't fire it out there, and I'm not going to either. And basically the reason is that it contains a lot of personal information. It contains things that I know the owners wouldn't want out there. Nothing like shameful or embarrassing or revealing wrongdoing. It's just a lot of personal details that I think they wouldn't want out there about themselves. And had they been doing something wrong, like scamming or actually money laundering or stealing the funds on deposit, anything like that, if that were happening, then I would just have put this out here the second I got it. But I don't believe any of these guys really did anything bad, so I don't want to post it. So what I did was I took a middle ground, because I wanted the public to know what was going on, and I know Poker News already had revealed that as well, but I wanted to dive even deeper into it and reveal what was going on. But at the same time, I didn't want to post the whole thing, which would dox a number of people. So I decided to take a middle ground and just describe what I had read and be very detailed and thorough, and also mix my opinion in there as to what I felt happened. So that's what I did. And you may have already seen my post on X, which has gone semi-viral. It has well over 100,000 views now. But let's go to the warrant, and I will go through it to where I think you can understand the entire contents of it. The only things I'm going to skip are the irrelevant stuff that nobody's going to really care about. But I did a very thorough analysis on X, and I'm going to do the same thing right now for you here on this show. And if you forget anything I'm saying, you can go on X, and the thread will mirror a lot of what I'm saying here. First of all, I want to tell you about the ownership of the lodge. The ownership is not what it appeared to be. Remember, I said near the beginning that it was announced that Doug Polk, Brad Owen, and Andrew Nemi bought the lodge in early 2022. So you'd assume that they were the major owners, and maybe there's a fourth major owner who already owned it and they partially bought it. Well, it turns out that's not true. There are three major owners of the lodge, but only one of them is among those three names. I bet you can guess who. That would be Doug Polk. So Doug Polk, Jake Abdallah, who's also known as Jay Lama online, like on Poker Stars, and I played a good deal of poker with him on there in the 2000s. He was a poker pro. He was a good winning player. I don't know how much he plays today. He's somewhat known in the community, but he's not a big name by any means. And then Jason Levin, who I've never heard of before. And someone told me that Jason Levin was the original owner of the lodge and that he was the one who sold to Polk and Abdallah. Together, the three of them collectively own 63.3% of the lodge and are presumably the decision makers in the company. So where do Andrew Nemi and Brad Owen fit in if the three major owners, who comprise 63%, are Polk, Abdallah, and Levin? Well, there are 18 other minor owners. So there's 21 total owners of the lodge, but only three of them are major owners. The rest of them own, quote, less than 7%, according to the warrant. And less than 7% doesn't mean 7%. It means it could be anywhere from 0.01% to 6.99%. It does not specify what percent each of these people own, but the 18 people collectively own 36.7%, meaning they're averaging about 2% ownership each. 12 of those 18 names are not known to people in poker. I've never heard of these 12 people before, so I won't bother listing them. The 6 you would know would be the aforementioned Brad Owen and Andrew Nemi, and then Ryan Fee, Nick Petrangelo. They were both coaches on Doug's Upswing Poker training site that he formerly owned. Then also Jamie Kerstetter and Thomas Keeling, that some of you know as Seriously Serious. Thomas is also the producer of Doug Polk's videos. A lot of the funny stuff, the trolling stuff that's done in Doug Polk's videos is actually done by Thomas. It does not appear that any of the minor owners are accused of any wrongdoing, and I have to assume, though it does not say that explicitly in the warrant, I have to assume that they are silent partners. And that includes Owen and Nemi. So why were they put out there as major owners? Like, it wasn't said that they own a large piece of it, but when it said that Doug Polk, Andrew Nemi, and Brad Owen bought the lodge, and it turns out that Owen and Nemi each own less than 7%, maybe a lot less, then why would they put that out there? Well, because it appears to me that Owen and Nemi were figureheads for marketing purposes, because they each have a big audience, and having them as owners can attract more people to the lodge, and it probably worked. But the real power at the lodge laid in the hands of Polk, Abdallah, and Levin. In my opinion, though, there's nothing wrong with the fact that they presented Nemi and Owen that way, because even major companies do this. For example, the Dodgers like to present that Magic Johnson is a major owner of the team, when in reality he owns very little. But he's the highest profile owner, he's the most famous owner, and it sounds cool to say that Magic Johnson owns the team. So when you hear that Magic Johnson and his group bought the Dodgers, then it's a more interesting story. So that's the way he's been promoted, is one of the owners of the Dodgers, when in reality he owns a very small percentage. So it's kind of like that. So it doesn't really matter who owns what as far as marketing goes. So if they want to fudge that a little bit and make a minor owner into an implied major owner, it doesn't really matter. But just wanted to put that out there. So definitely Owen and Nemi are not accused of any kind of wrongdoing. It seems like they didn't have any decision-making power over there. The beginning of the warrant ordered seizure of all bank accounts at a specific bank in Nevada. I'm not going to tell you what bank it is, but I will tell you it is a bank local to Nevada that does not have any branches in Texas. So interestingly, it was a cross-state seizure. The seizure was ordered for any accounts registered to Tempus Holdings, a TEMPUS Holdings, which is a company said to be associated with the lodge, and Jake Abdallah, Jason Levin, or Doug Polk. So any of those 4 entities having accounts at that bank, they were to be seized and then turned over to the Williamson County, Texas District Attorney, who would then begin forfeiture proceedings. Whether those forfeiture proceedings would just end up with all the money for Williamson County, Texas, or whether it would end up partially seized by the government and partially used to pay players is not known. Some people on X are insisting that none of that money will go towards paying players. That might be possible, but that is what is going to happen, is the seized funds are going to be turned over to the Williamson County District Attorney to begin forfeiture proceedings. How much was seized? Well, I will get to that a little bit later, but a seizure did happen. As I said, the Texas Alcohol Beverage Commission, the TABC, was behind the raid. The officer who was behind the warrant is Douglas Bell. In the warrant, he claims to have 22 years' experience dealing with money laundering, fraud, wire fraud, gambling, and a bunch of other crimes like prostitution that don't really apply here. Agent Bell is also assigned to the Special Investigations Unit of the TABC and also the Texas Money Laundering Task Force with the IRS. So that's probably why the IRS was there, is because he has a connection with them, that he, in addition to working for the TABC, he also works for the IRS in a Texas branch that they have over there dealing with money laundering. So what began this whole thing? Why did this occur? What started it? What was the catalyst? Well, it was something I didn't expect. It turned out that the catalyst to this, from what I can tell, it didn't explicitly say this in the warrant, but it said something implying it. It said that there was a public complaint filed on April 3rd, 2024, now almost 2 years ago. The public complaint, meaning that someone from the public made a complaint, meaning it wasn't from law enforcement, alleged that the business, meaning the lodge, was hosting real money gambling while holding an on-premise alcohol permit. And this person making the complaint stated that according to the 2005 opinion by Greg Abbott, that this was illegal to hold this alcohol permit and offer real money gambling at the same time. This was the earliest date mentioned in the entire warrant. So that's very interesting to me. If that was the earliest date mentioned, then it would seem to me that this was the genesis of the whole thing. So someone made a complaint about the lodge to the TABC, and they went from there. So really what this means is presumably the entire investigation was kicked off by a snitch. Pretty bad. According to the warrant, surveillance began on the lodge by the TABC on June 13th, 2024. On that date, agents went down to the club and observed it. Agents noted that the entrance of the club was not secure and open to anyone walking in the area. These are the exact words in the warrant. It was also noted that, quote, there was no security present at the club's entrance. They did note security was around, but not blocking the entrance and preventing anyone from going in who didn't belong. The reason that they were going in this direction right away was if they could show that the lodge was a public place and not a private place, then that immediately would mean they're violating the law by offering poker there. So that's why they were looking into how easy was it to get in there without a membership. Also, while this didn't really play very much into the whole warrant and investigation, they did take note of all the license plates in the parking lot and looked up who was parked there and who each car was registered to. Yeah. And it noted in the warrant that some of the vehicles were registered to poker players who were listed as winners of poker tournaments at the lodge on social media. So they actually went and Googled these players and found that they were bragging about winning tournaments there. None of these players are going to be in trouble, by the way. They were just noting that this connects to the fact that real money poker was going on in there. Then everything went kind of quiet for a while. They went down there on June 13th, 2024, as I just mentioned, which was only 2 months after that complaint was filed by the snitch. It does say in the warrant that on June 7th, 2024, Agent Bell, who's the one whose name is on the warrant, He observed a confidential report, which presumably was generated from that public complaint, that there was some, quote, questionable activity associated with the lodge, and that he began to investigate. So I guess the decision to investigate was made on June 7th by Agent Bell. And then they went down there, took a look at it on June 13th, and then it didn't seem like they did much with it for the rest of the year of 2024. They did look in 2025, probably around March. They took a look at the first 2 months of 2025 and found that in January and February that over $1.35 million was deposited into that Nevada bank account that I talked about earlier. It's not clear how much of this was player money, how much was profit for the business or operating capital for the business, but they just noted that that money was deposited there. It also noted that the same account was used to pay various bills for the business. So basically they're showing that this was the account for the lodge, and that justified why they were seizing it. It also stated that in those first 2 months, $808,000 worth of wire transfers came in from professional poker players, and then $854,000 of transfers went back out to those same players. This is presumably just the funding of the high-stakes games that went on there, like the ones on stream, so I don't think that's a very big deal. It was just high-stakes games were going to go. People didn't want to bring a ton of cash over there, so they wired money in, then money was wired back out, and collectively these pros won $46,000 or so. Poker News did share some screenshots of these transactions, but I'm not going to bother to read them to you. They're really not that important. I do want to say it does not appear that the lodge was stealing or appropriating any kind of player money, so it wasn't like a full tilt where they were selling chips and then spending the money when they should have been holding the cash on deposit to cover those chips. That was not going on from what I can see. The warrant does not allege that, so it is highly likely the business did have enough money for all outstanding chips and tournament payments at the time of this raid. I don't know why the investigation moved so slowly. Again, they did nothing for the rest of 2024. The whole second half of 2024, they seemed to do nothing. They finally looked into the bank account, what it seemed like probably in March 2025, looked at the past 2 months. But they decided to start their undercover operation there in April of 2025, which was 10 months after the previous visit. Poker News did discuss this in their article about the warrant, but I'll tell you my impression. The TABC sent 2 agents, Agent Teague and Alfaro, to visit the lodge and to pose undercover as normal poker players. The 2 agents noted they were able to get into the door without a membership. However, they went right to the front desk and stated that they were new players. At that point, the front desk said, oh, well, this is a members-only club, so you'll have to buy a membership if you want to remain here and if you want to play. So at that point, they both bought memberships. Now, this will work in their favor if this does go to court, because this does at least show when these guys went to the front desk, they were immediately told, buy a membership or get out. So they bought the membership, and they both played 1-2 no-limit hold'em. It was noted in the warrant that there was a $10 per hour seat rental fee to play poker, except for 4 hours in the morning, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., where playing is free. It was not commented on in the warrant that this was illegal, having this seat rental fee, but it was noted that the fee was charged. Nothing that interesting happened during that undercover operation other than Agent Teague ordering and being served an alcoholic beverage, which was noted. They made another visit on May 9th, which was almost identical in the way it went. Then, again, didn't do anything for a while. So 4.5 months later, on September 25th, they went back. Now, an interesting thing happened on September 25th. Agent Teague decided that he's going to try to test the boundaries of this membership. So he did not go to the front counter this time. And remember, the memberships they bought, they only lasted 1 month. So their memberships weren't good anymore. So he was no longer a member, nor was Agent Alfaro. So Agent Alfaro went and purchased a membership and went to go play poker again. Agent Teague just bypassed the front counter, according to the warrant. Presumably that means he just walked by it instead of stopping there. He just walked past it. And then he went directly to the bar to order a drink. Teague then reported that he was not asked for proof of membership when he ordered that drink, nor did anyone approach him at any time and ask him to show his membership. So he said he was freely able to move about the gaming floor of the club unimpeded. Now, he did not allege that he or anyone else was playing poker without a membership, but just that simply walking by the front desk could allow anyone to make their way into the club, even to order drinks, without being asked to show proof of membership. Again, they were doing this to establish that the lodge was a public place rather than a private one, because anyone could just walk in and not show a membership and access the whole place. They just couldn't play poker. Now, I think the lodge would actually have a decent defense to this in court, because it's not like Agent Teague had permission to walk in without a membership. He just did it. So you could say this about a lot of restricted access places where you just sneak by whoever the front gatekeeper is, and if you can, then you get in. So think about a nightclub, which charges an admission to get in. If the bouncer's busy looking at somebody else and you quickly sneak by him, yeah, you can get in for free. If you want to see a movie, you can get in for free if the ticket taker's looking the other way. If you want to get into any kind of club, really, forget one with gambling, but any kind of private club, if whoever is guarding the entrance is preoccupied with something else or someone else, you can sometimes just walk by and get in. That doesn't mean you're allowed to be in there or it's not private. It just means you snuck in. So I believe that would be their defense, and I think it would be a pretty good one. I still believe it would be considered a private place, even if they're not enforcing it very well. But that seems to be what the TABC is alleging by this. The next TABC visit occurred on January 22nd, 2026, so we're getting a lot closer to the present. They actually made 3 visits in the end of January, so this is the first one. This time, Agent Teague was not involved for whatever reason, so they had Agent Alfaro again and a new agent named Alanis. That visit was unremarkable. Neither agent tried to bypass the front desk on that one, I guess because Teague wasn't there. They weren't that interested in doing that, so they just basically went in and played poker. The only thing that went differently was that Agent Alanis asked them, hey, if I have a membership from the San Antonio Lodge, can I use it here? I'm not sure why he asked that, but that's what he asked. And then they told him, no, each location has a different price structure and rules, so no, they're completely separate memberships, so you have to buy one here. And they did both buy a membership on January 22nd. A week later, on January 29th, Agent Teague and Alfaro came back. Agent Alanis was out of this now. Once again, Agent Teague went back to his attempt to bypass the counter and was able to do so. He did not order alcohol this time. He didn't go to the bar, but he did circle the entire club unchallenged, and he even ordered food from the attached restaurant, which is called the Odds Bar and Bistro. The food was brought to him from the restaurant while he stayed in the lodge. He then exited and confirmed that he was never asked to show or purchase membership, even though he went throughout the entire place. He did concede, though, in the warrant, that he never tried to play poker without one. I have been told that it's impossible to play poker at the lodge without a membership because you have to swipe in while playing, and you can't do so if you're not a member. So this is why these agents likely didn't bother to try to play poker without a membership. Whenever they did play, they got a membership first. On January 30th was their final visit. Agent Alfaro played a poker tournament there, a low-stakes poker tournament. There were 50 players. Of those 50, 23 added on. And Agent Alfaro, I don't know if he added on or not, but Agent Alfaro actually finished 5th in that tournament. And he won a whopping $170. So if this being a state agent doesn't work out for him, we know a profession that might. Agent Alfaro might become the very first state alcohol control agent to transition to being a poker pro because he realized his poker talent while investigating a poker room. 5th out of 50 players. Good job. They should have like a separate Hendon mob category for state agents undercover. I bet he'd be number one in that category, even with only $170 on his Hendon mob. I don't know if they're going to report this on Hendon mob. I guess they probably won't because of like a daily tournament. Wouldn't that be hilarious, though, if he's up there in the Hendon mob for cashing when he's there undercover? I guess it's a pretty fun job to sit there and play a poker tournament, get to the final table, and they're like, hey, you want to chop? It's like, no, I don't want to chop. I don't really care about the money. Now, also in this same section of the warrant where it's describing that tournament where Agent Alfaro finished 5th, it says something that I think could be a big problem for the Lodge when it comes to legal action against them. And that is, it states that they collected $3,650 worth of buy-ins for that tournament and only paid out $2,570. And it says, concluding the club or house kept $1,080 of tournament monies. So I think the point they're trying to make there is that they are kind of taking a rake. This isn't what they're directly saying, but they are noting that a large portion of the prize pool was taken out through this tournament, $1,080 out of $3,650. So I think that could be a problem because to me, and I'm not an attorney, I'm not an expert on Texas law, but to me that does sound a lot like a rake from a tournament standpoint. That's different than having a seat fee, different than having a membership fee. This is where they're taking out a certain amount from the tournament. I don't know if they have percentages set to take from the tournament or if they just take a flat rate out, but I would guess this has something to do with how many entries they collect. So that could be a problem, even though other rooms do it, and we will see if that ends up being impactful. Agent Teague went back to his pattern of bypassing the front desk, and once again he was able to do so. But once he did it, he said, you know what, I'm bored with always walking by the front desk and circling the place. Let me do something different this time. So after getting past the front desk and noting that he was able to do so and nobody challenged him for a membership, then he went to the cage and said, yeah, I'd like a membership. I want to play poker. So he went in, played some poker, and then something interesting happened. At some point, Agent Teague stood up from the table and said, I want to speak to the general manager. The general manager was Johnny Grooms. Well, Johnny Grooms is a name you might remember because he was the tournament director for the World Series of Poker in the early to mid-2000s. In fact, Johnny Grooms handed me my one and only World Series of Poker bracelet. He's the one who awarded it to me because he was the tournament director in 2005. However, he was no longer the tournament director in 2006. He was replaced by a gentleman named Jack Effel in 2006, who is still the tournament director 20 years later. I lost track at that point of what Grooms was doing. It is not clear why they replaced Grooms, and from what I heard, he didn't quit. They actually replaced him. So for some reason, they were not happy with Johnny Grooms anymore and put Jack Effel in his place. So anyway, Agent Teague went up to Grooms and asked if he could host a private event at the Lodge. And Grooms allegedly told Agent Teague that he could put a package together which would include alcohol and food service, and where players at this private event could play either cash or tournament poker, whatever Agent Teague would like. And then Agent Teague said, well, wait a minute, what are we going to do about the memberships? Do all my people at this private event have to become members? And Grooms allegedly said, well, I can just comp the players a membership for this private event. If they're just going to come here for that one event, they don't need to be members. I'll just comp them a membership. Well, this event was never actually set up, but this was mentioned in the warrant because, again, they're trying to show that the membership doesn't really matter and it's actually a public place. And that by asking, what are we going to do about membership, and with Grooms saying, oh, don't worry, we'll just comp the membership, that this proves it's a public place. I don't agree. Why? Because a private event is what? It is... Yes, it's private. If it's a private event, it's not public. It can't be both at the same time. So a private event means people in the public are not allowed to be there. It doesn't matter if it's in a public place, like the Commerce Casino in LA. That's a public place. I can walk in there at any time. I don't even have to say who I am. But if there's a private event going on at Commerce, as they sometimes have, I can't just walk into the private event and say, hey guys, I'm joining here. They'll throw me out of the room. So a private event is private. So definitely any private event taking place at the lodge is private, and the membership doesn't matter. So grooms could have said, look, we don't need memberships for this. We're just going to let them in for the private event because it's private anyway. So I don't think that proves anything. You can't say a private event proves it's a public place. I think that's a nothing burger. And the gotcha they think they have in that warrant is not a gotcha, at least as far as that's concerned. Now, here is a bit of a scary part regarding Abdallah, Levin, and Polk. That's scary for them, not for us. But listen to this. It said that the three of them are accused of, quote, the offense of money laundering from the felony criminal offense of engaging in organized criminal activity derived from criminal offenses of promoting of gambling and keeping a gambling place. Oh. You see Doug Polk as an organized criminal? Is he the godfather of Texas poker? Because he's accused of the felony criminal offense of engaging in organized criminal activity and the offense of money laundering? I mean, that sounds like real serious stuff where Polk could go away for a very long time. But hold on a second. Before you plan to read about Doug Polk's long time coming in the slammer, keep in mind that this statement in the warrant, to me, actually proves the opposite. Because this makes it highly unlikely to me that any actual money laundering was occurring there. Because they say that the offense of money laundering was from the offense of promotion of gambling and keeping a gambling place. So, very simply put, they're saying, we're calling it money laundering because they ran what we think is an illegal gambling operation and they kept the profits from it. And by sending the profits to a bank account, that's money laundering. Well, no, it's really not. So they're using very, very broad terms here of money laundering and organized criminal activity, but they really just mean three guys are running a poker room, profiting from it, and we think that's against the law. Why would they put it this way? Why would it be put in such a scary way in the warrant? Well, remember, they're trying to get a judge to sign off on this. And this is very common when they seek warrants, that they overstate the crimes they feel are occurring to more strongly justify the need for search and seizure. And this is common, as I said, with any warrant that's written up and presented to a judge. So to me, it does not appear that the lodge, anyone working at the lodge, Doug Polk, Jake Abdallah, Jason Levin, I don't believe any of them were doing anything wrong or unethical aside from running a poker room in a state where the legality was always questionable and also not keeping guard of the door very well. So that's what I believe here. Maybe I'll turn out to be wrong, but from my reading of the warrant, that's what I seem to think. F and Donkey in chat said they aren't arguing that charging time is just charging rake and calling it time. They seem to be hanging their entire case on the fact that they're able to sneak into this private club, which makes it illegal. And then F and Donkey mentions at his own poker room, he runs a small poker room in Texas, as I told you, I won't even do things like early bird chip bonuses in tournaments because I'm scared of breaking the everyone has the equal chance of winning outside of skill and luck. There's lots of people playing fast and loose with interpretations, he writes, but honestly, it's not the lodge doing it. The 5 rooms closest to me all openly collect rake and don't charge seat rental. Wow. Sounds like those are the ones probably that should have been busted, not the lodge. But yeah, you got to be just really careful with everything. Like, listen to F and Donkey. He's saying he doesn't want to give any kind of early chip bonuses or anything like that. He just wants to make sure every single player is on totally equal footing in all ways, so the state can't make excuses as to why his club is illegal. And that's the right approach here. If you're going to run a room in a gray market, then you've got to really, really, really keep your nose clean. After the warrant was served and the lodge was raided, and of course this is something that was an additional document that I read. This was not the search warrant because this is after the warrant was served. So after the warrant was served and the lodge was raided, $720,994 was ultimately seized from that Nevada bank account that I mentioned before. It appeared from the document I read and from the warrant that this was going to be the only set of bank accounts that would be seized or frozen. It just seemed to be that one bank they were interested in, and then they did put the results in a different document that they seized almost $721,000. However, I have since come upon additional information, and that was actually after I posted my entire write-up on X. But I've since come upon additional information that was given to me, and I can't tell you who gave it to me or why, but additional information was given to me that a few $1 million was seized. It wasn't just the $721,000. I don't know where they got the rest of the money from. I think they also seized some ATMs that they had going at the lodge, but I doubt that much money was sitting in the ATMs. But overall, a few $1 million was seized, is what I was told. So it's more than this amount that was stated in the document that I read. So yeah, that's not chump change for sure. But again, recall that number one, the lodge has a second location that's still in operation. Number two, the business seems to have done well up until this point. And number three, Doug Polk and Jake Abdallah are both successful guys who should be able to cover the outstanding chips and tournament payouts, whatever they might be. And I don't even think it's a huge sum of money. So I believe that's why Doug Polk was very open with the fact that he's going to cover it no matter what happens, because his reputation is worth doing that. And I think he just wants to do the right thing. I don't think he's a bad guy. So he's actually pledged twice on X that he will make the players whole if for whatever reason the lodge can't pay out. It is possible that these millions of dollars that were seized will just be completely forfeited. It's possible that if they say, hey, can we keep some of it to pay the players that have outstanding chips, it's possible Texas will say, nope, you come up with the money. We are seizing this. Tough luck. It's very possible that they will attempt to and succeed in seizing all of that money. It's also possible that they will hinge the seizure of this money and the lack of challenging of the seizure to not charging Polk, Abdallah, and Levin criminally. Because remember, while none of them were arrested, it does state in the warrant that they are accused of felonies here, and pretty scary sounding felonies for money laundering and engaging in organized crime. So they could call these guys in with their attorneys, of course, and say, hey, we have a lot of evidence that you're breaking the law here. We could put you away for years. But if you would like to give up all the money that we seized and agree not to challenge it, then we will agree not to charge you with anything criminally. And as long as you don't reopen this location, then that will be that. It's very possible that they're going to say that, or that they'll give them limited permission to open just to pay everybody and then have to shut down again. So it is possible that this might just end up being a money grab, and also kind of a warning shot that is being sent out to the rest of the poker rooms of, hey, we closed the biggest one, so don't mess around. You better stick to the law real closely, or we're going to get you. So it's possible that their goals are just to make sure the lodge stays closed and to seize a few $1 million out of the whole thing, and then they'll go away and not charge anybody. But it does appear the only three people who seem to be in peril of being charged are the three major owners, Polk, Abdallah, and Levin, and it's my opinion that none of them will be. Maybe I'll be proven wrong, but that's just my guess at this point, that they're not going to be charged, but that the possibility of charging them might be held over their head to be able to keep all the money without any kind of challenge. I do place an extremely high chance upon the players getting paid. However, don't expect it anytime soon. It might take several months or maybe even more before this occurs. Now, I bet one of the questions you probably have in your head right now is, if Polk is saying he will pay everybody no matter what happens, why doesn't he just pay now? Why doesn't he just say, hey, meet me at such and such place, bring your chips to me, and I'll pay you. I'll write you a check. Why doesn't he just do that and then collect it back from the lodge later? Well, it's because this could complicate the legal case against them. So I'm assuming that their attorneys are telling them to hold off paying anybody until this entire matter is finished, or at least hold off until it's safe to make these payments without introducing new angles into this legal matter. It just adds another dimension if they start paying people holding the chips from their personal bank accounts or from the Lodge San Antonio, which so far hasn't been touched. So I think the attorneys are saying, let's just leave everything as it stands. Let's cooperate and negotiate with the state here, get the most favorable treatment we can here, and then when it seems to be settled, then we can start paying people. That's what my guess is. That's not what they've said, but that's kind of what they've implied. Even Doug's statement seemed to imply that. I have seen some people on X that I'll call enterprising gentlemen who are offering to buy Lodge chips at a pretty low rate. I saw one of them at 20 cents on the dollar. Should you do this? Should you say the Lodge is toast and it's worth 20 cents on the dollar to get something? Answer, no. Do not sell it to these people unless you're really, really, really desperate for money. Or unless someone is going to buy the chips at a small markdown. So if someone says, hey, I'll buy them at 90%, maybe it's tempting to do that just to have the money in hand now and know that there's no chance that you'll end up with zero. But I can't stress enough how highly likely it is that you're going to be fully paid once it's deemed safe to pay you. So don't be impatient. Just hold the chips, keep them in a safe place, and I'm sure you will be able to cash them in some way, either at the Lodge when it reopens for this, or from Doug himself. Do not sell it to these people who are buying it for very low rates. That is a big mistake. You may ask, why don't I do it then? Why don't I offer a much higher rate? Why don't I buy it at 70 cents on the dollar if I'm this sure? Well, the problem is I'd be taking a risk of counterfeit chips because I don't have any knowledge of what a Lodge chip looks like. I wouldn't be able to spot a counterfeit. And I also don't have any records of the chips that are out there, like the Lodge itself probably has. So I'd be afraid if I bought people's chips, I'd end up holding counterfeits, and then I wouldn't be able to be paid. And secondarily, it's a chance that they would not pay me because I'm not the one who's known to be holding the chips, and that they're only willing to pay the actual chip holder. So I wouldn't want to get into all that, so that's why I'm not going to even bother. Nor do I want to do this and take advantage of people's situation here, even if they want to do the transaction. I think it's just kind of crappy. But that's why I'm not offering a higher rate. I'm not offering any rate. I'm not going to buy the chips. But I'm telling you that you shouldn't be selling it to these people unless you get a really, really high rate. Now, what about the future of the Lodge at Round Rock? Does it have one? Well, maybe, maybe not. Remember, the players at the time of the raid said that they were told to take their chips home and come back when the business reopens. And that might sound like that the agents are believing that they're going to let the Lodge reopen. But they also might have meant that they're just going to let it reopen for people to be able to cash out. And it's possible they just said that and didn't really mean it, that they were just basically saying these chips aren't worthless, so take them home, but at the moment you can't use them. That may have been what they were trying to say. It's also possible that the Lodge will be reopened and everything will be proceeding again normally, or mostly normally. It's also possible that the Lodge will lose its business license. If it does reopen, it's even more possible that it'll never be allowed to serve any kind of alcohol again. And it's possible that even if they're allowed to reopen, that the ownership will deem it to be too risky to reopen because the lightning already struck once there. Doug Polk just had a second child. His wife gave birth to a daughter. So congratulations to him for that. He now has 2 kids, a son and a daughter. So he may say, screw it. He's got a lot of money. He's had a lot of success. And he may say, you know what? This isn't worth it. I'm not going to run a card room and worry about getting arrested and charged with felonies. You know, if I get out of this one, that's it. I'm done. I'm not running card rooms again. So he might just get out of the whole thing. It wouldn't even surprise me if he sold his interest in the San Antonio Lodge and just got out of this whole business of running poker rooms. But even if he doesn't, they may just not open it again, even if they're allowed to. There's also the concern that if they do reopen and they commit any further violations, that the government will come down on them harder this time. That the government will say, look, we gave you a chance to reopen and reform, and you didn't, and you're still breaking the law, so now we are arresting, we are charging you with felonies. So they may be afraid that they've basically used up their one time if they do get out of being charged. So basically, I believe if the lodge had checked membership at the door and didn't let you in without a membership, and if they never served alcohol, then it's likely that this raid would not have occurred. It looks to me like some person who didn't like the lodge, or didn't like Polk, or maybe both, on April 3rd, 2024, reported them to the TABC. Maybe it was a disgruntled employee. Maybe it's an angry player who lost money there. Maybe it's just someone who hates Doug Polk. But someone went and reported the lodge on April 3rd and reported it from the angle of, hey, they're running real money poker while they're serving alcohol. And they just happened to catch the attention of a TABC agent who wanted to do something about it. That's what it looks like to me. And then this happened. But had they gone down there and seen that they couldn't get in without a membership and noticed that there was no alcohol being served, they just would not have really found violations they probably would have acted on. They probably would have said, yeah, you know what? We really don't see a problem here. It's no different than the other room, so F it. I don't think that this was an actual witch hunt. I don't think this was aimed at Polk himself. I don't think they had it in for the lodge. I think it was just one of those unfortunate things where someone made a report and it happened to strike the interest of one of the agents at the TABC who decided to go forth and look at it. And maybe seeing the whole thing about how the door was wide open and anyone could just stroll in already got their attention, because that's what it said in the warrant, that all they did on June 13th of 2024, 2 months after they got this report, was just go and observe the place. And they noticed that people could walk in and not stop by security regarding checking memberships. So maybe had they seen a security guard checking memberships, they would have just given up and driven away and been done with it. But I think that kind of kicked off the whole thing. Like, okay, this place isn't right, and we're going to shut it down. Now, what about what Chad Holloway said and what others are saying on X, that if the lodge never reopens, that this is pretty much it for Texas poker? Well, I don't believe so. This is, of course, just my opinion. But I will tell you that it is clear that this raid was very focused upon one room. In fact, even the other lodge in San Antonio was left alone. So if this were aimed at stopping Texas poker completely, there likely would have been several raids at once, and at minimum, they would have hit both lodges at once. But instead, this seems to just have been an investigation that was aimed at one room. And yeah, there's many conspiracies as to why this occurred. There's even some people saying, oh, they're trying to get legalized poker in the state and legalized casinos, and they want certain preferred parties to run these, and they're trying to knock off the largest competition. But I don't believe that. Then they would have raided TCH as well. Anything's possible, but I don't think this is as complex as many people are making it out to be. Unfortunately, it really just looked like someone made a complaint, and it happened to land in the right hands to take action on it. It's too bad it happened, but that's probably what happened. If you run a Texas card room, or if you're involved in the operation of one, you really, really, really need to make sure to never let anyone in the door without a membership. You need to have a guard standing there at the door the entire time, checking for membership, and sending people to buy one if they don't have it. And also, probably not a good idea to sell alcohol if you're running one of these rooms, even if you've gotten away with it so far, because that seems to be the other basis of what they're doing here. Hopefully this turns out okay. I'm rooting for the ownership of the lodge to not get charged, not get in any trouble. I'm rooting, of course, for all the players to get paid, which I believe they will. I hope that Texas poker continues. And I really hope that one day it becomes completely legalized and regulated, because this current situation is absolutely ridiculous. If people in Texas want to play poker, they should be able to. There's no reason to have it outlawed like this. And it's especially stupid that those who want to play poker can, but they have to do it under these weird circumstances. So if the state is so against it, they should outlaw it completely, but that's still not the right thing to do. They should let adults play poker if they want to play poker. So it really just needs to be legalized and regulated, and then nobody's going to have to worry about things like this ever happening again unless any of the regulated rooms stray from what is required of them. And it also needs to be made crystal clear to everybody what these regulations are. Can you serve alcohol or not? Do you absolutely have to have a security guard at the door to make sure that people are members? Like, whatever the rules are need to be clarified, even if they don't legalize and regulate it. Even in the current situation, law enforcement at the state level should clarify what is and isn't okay. And then whichever rooms violate it, if they get in trouble, okay, it's their fault. But the problem is, nobody knows for sure. Everybody has an idea of what they should do, but as you see some small deviations from this, such as having a membership club, but where they don't enforce very strongly someone walking in and just milling around, that apparently wasn't good enough. And the alcohol thing, that's really ambiguous, and it seems like other rooms are serving alcohol and not getting in trouble, yet the lodge was. That's my analysis. And I'll be surprised if I'm too far away from what the actual truth is. I think the lodge made some mistakes. The lodge should have been much more vigilant about the membership thing. They should have been more careful regarding whether getting this mixed beverage liquor license and then serving alcohol to people at the table was a good idea. It seemed like they were trying to find ways to explain to themselves why these things were okay. I think the membership thing, they were just lazy. I think they just were lax with it when they shouldn't have been. I don't think that was really an intentional decision. I just think they had a bad system there. But I think with the alcohol, yeah, it's lucrative to serve alcohol. It's lucrative to sell drinks to people playing. It's a big profit margin on that. But if this is going to induce problems for you, if other rooms are afraid to do it, even if some are currently doing it, if others are afraid to do it, there's a reason they're afraid to do it. And I think they may have reasoned to themselves that this is going to be okay. They probably consulted some attorneys. They probably looked into whether they felt it was legal or not, and I think they convinced themselves, oh yeah, it'll be fine. Oh yeah, these other places do it. It should be fine. And who cares what Greg Abbott said? That was 20 years ago. And I can just see how this happened, where they basically looked for a legal opinion that they agreed with. This is just my opinion. I don't know what they really did. And now look where they are. So you've just got to be ultra careful in this situation. You can't do what's optimal for making money. You need to be ultra conservative and careful to make it very difficult for them to come down on you, especially at the state level. So I'm sure this is very stressful for the three major owners. It sucks to know there's not only your business being closed, but there's the situation hanging over your heads where they're saying that they believe that you committed various serious felonies. And you probably go Google what the penalties are for these felonies, and you go, oh my God, I could spend years and years behind bars. And imagine, especially for someone like Doug, who's got two little kids. I don't think Doug really believes he's going to be sitting in the slammer for a long time, but even the possibility of this is very, very stressful. So I'm sure they can't wait till this matter is over and they get out of it. But at the moment, yeah, it's sitting there with these felonies hanging over their heads, even though they haven't been charged with anything. I don't think they'll be charged, but I do think the possibility of being charged will be used to browbeat them into some kind of agreement. That's just my guess. So I guess all good things have to come to an end. And the lodge was a little bit careless, and that's going to probably mean its permanent demise, is my guess. I don't think it's ever going to open again in this location. I think the Lodge Round Rock is done for good. I took a while to edit and post this episode, and something else has occurred since then, so I wanted to put up this update here, recorded on the morning of March 27th, 2026. Some news has come from the lodge that was given to their employees. It's some sad news regarding the future of the lodge and the future employment of these people who are working for them. Even though no charges have been filed, the Williamson County DA's office is insisting that the lodge did operate illegally. The lodge denies this, but the attorneys of the lodge have stated that it's going to be unwise for the club to reopen until this matter is resolved. And if they were to try to reopen before that, another seizure could occur. So that would be bad for them, bad for the players. So obviously they can't do that. The closure is likely to be for months at minimum. That's just in my opinion. They're not stating that specifically, but that's what I believe. And as a result, they have permanently laid off all of the staff. So here is the letter that they sent out to every staff member. It says, "When we started this journey, there were no guarantees, only belief, grit, and a shared commitment to build something meaningful. Through the early challenges, we found our footing together. We built relationships, earned trust, and created a place that was more than just a business. It became a community because of you. Each of you played a role in bringing that vision to life. From the front desk to the porters, dealers, managers, and production team, every detail, every interaction, every long day and late night added up to something truly special. You made this place what it was, not the building, not the brand, you. That's why it's so painful to say that the Lodge Round Rock location will need to shut its doors for the foreseeable future. While no charges have been brought, and we maintain that the club has always operated with the utmost integrity and within the laws of Texas, the Williamson County District Attorney's Office has made clear to our attorneys that they believe the lodge's current business model does not comply with Texas law. For this reason, we cannot reopen. Doing so would run the risk that authorities might once again raid the lodge, seize more cash and assets, and potentially make arrests. Because we have not been given any indication of when the investigation will conclude, we have no other viable path forward at this time. As a result, we are forced to make the incredibly difficult decision to let our entire staff go. We hope you know just how valued each of you are, and as we hope for a favorable outcome, should we be able to once again open our doors, the plan would be to welcome you back with open arms. There are no words that fully capture how much this hurts, not just as a business decision, but on a human level. I am deeply grateful for everything you've given, and I will carry that with me always. You didn't just show up to work, you built something that mattered. As we now turn to the difficult task of determining what comes next, please know that each of you has my respect, my appreciation, and my sincere thanks. I hope you take pride in what we created together because it was real and it was special. I will miss all of you more than I can say. With a heavy heart, Jason Levin." By the way, that may have been written by AI because there were some more M dashes. Oh boy. In any case, the lodge will be closed for quite some time, maybe for good, and anyone who had a job there is going to have to seek new employment, so that is quite sad. Well, thank you for listening to this special edition of Poker Fraud Alert Radio. If you're a newer listener, be aware that I do this show every few weeks. It used to be every week, but I don't know. I've gotten older. I've lost the energy to do it every week, but I do it every few weeks now and cover a lot of topics in poker, gambling, and Las Vegas. A lot of stuff other people won't cover. And I basically do a deep dive into everything like I did right here, except I'll do multiple topics on each typical show. And it's a different kind of show than you hear elsewhere. So give it a shot. You can catch some episodes in podcast form or on YouTube if you want to check out what I typically do. And even if you just hear this once to hear about the lodge, I thank you for listening to me and giving me a chance to tell you about it. If you are someone who is rooting for bad things to happen to Doug Polk, well, I guess you're half getting your wish. This definitely has been very stressful for him. I'm sure the timing was very bad for this to occur right as his kid is being born. I'm sure this is something he thinks about every day and every night. And he'll probably be out a good deal of money from what happens here. But at the same time, I don't think he's going to end up in prison, and I don't think his reputation is going to be harmed by this. And to be honest, I think he's generally good for poker. I think he's a decent guy. Obviously, he's not perfect. Obviously, he's picked fights. But hey, none of us are perfect, and I've picked fights, and most people on poker social media have picked fights at some point. So, as far as the major stuff goes, Doug Polk hasn't really done anything wrong. So, I'm rooting for the ownership there coming out okay from this, and hopefully Texas poker will be in better shape in years to come. Good night, good morning, good afternoon. Shalom.